Green energy from Ontario versus black gold in Alberta. More on the East versus West war of words next.
Charles Adler, Canada's king of talk radio, makes his return to the television world. Introducing Charles Adler, only on Sun News Network.
We've got the single largest greenhouse gas reduction project in North America. We're shutting down our coal-fired generators. That's not an easy thing to do.
Ontario Premier Dalton McGuinty passing wind about his green energy initiatives. Does he deserve the same federal support as Alberta? This is the kind of thing Canadians need to know. Tom Harris, Executive Director of the International Climate Science Coalition, joins us now from Ottawa. Hey, Tom.
Hey, Joan.
So Dalton McGuinty now is the latest politician to say that he wants federal money to pay for his wind projects. You're not in favor of that. Tell us why.
Well, virtually all of McGuinty's green plans are based on the hypothesis that we can somehow stop climate change, and then by using wind turbines and solar panels and cutting down on coal stations, we're going to somehow reduce climate change, heat waves, extreme weather, and of course that's all bogus. So, in fact, while it's good to save energy and reduce pollution, the idea that we can stop climate change is really just not substantiated by the science.
Now, we should give people a little bit of your background. You're a nonpartisan science-based group. Is that correct?
That's right. We're in about a dozen countries. And we're a virtual organization in that we don't have a central office, but we engage about 35 climate experts from around the world to try to work for what we call climate realism. In other words, a recognition that climate always changes. We're not deniers. That's a silly statement. You know, when we're called climate deniers, climate has always changed since the Earth was formed, but we have to learn to adapt to that change. And warming and cooling, you know, droughts and floods, they're all dangerous, and we have to work to help prepare for that. So in that sense, we believe in climate change. We just don't think you can stop it.
Okay. Now, talk to me about oil patch subsidies. You think that we should continue to subsidize the oil patch. Others might share a different opinion there, expecting that we should be putting more money into these brand new green technologies. Please compare and contrast why we should put money into the oil patch and we shouldn't necessarily put money into green technologies.
Okay, well, first of all, most of the supposed subsidies that are going to the oil sands, for example, are in fact tax breaks. There are some exceptions. For example, the idea that we're going to sequester or store carbon dioxide underground, that's receiving quite a lot of federal money, and that's a mistake. That should be canceled, and in fact, those projects are a waste of time. But the Alberta economy, in fact, the whole West, contributes far more to Canada's economy than Ontario. And so many of McGuinty's statements in the last day are simply wrong. Whether you take Alberta by itself or the whole West from Manitoba west, you find that the Alberta economy and the West give a lot more to Canada than Ontario when it comes to dollars per person. I think it makes a lot of sense to give tax breaks to developing energy sources that have a lot of potential to fulfill our energy needs. And the oil sands clearly are that. In fact, Canada is now the largest exporter to the United States of energy. We actually export more energy to the United States, let's say, than Saudi Arabia. And they want to have more of it, and they need it. Okay? So this is a very secure source of energy that we should help encourage until eventually it can stand on its own feet, and it's becoming one of the, well, it will become the major energy source for liquid fuels for North America. Now, on the other hand, the subsidies to green energy, as they call it, and it's a bit of a misnomer when you think about it, because cutting down all the trees in the Gatineau Park north of Ottawa to put out wind turbines to kill birds and produce a little bit of energy is hardly what you'd call green. But regardless, those subsidies should have ended about 10 years ago, because the technology has evolved enough in the solar and the wind area that we can see that it's not going to provide very much energy. So they shouldn't have the subsidies. They do need the subsidies to compete. Right now, McGuinty, for example, has guaranteed 20 years of payment for wind power at 3 times the market rate and solar power at 10 times the market rate. And, you know, I was sent something here from an economist just a few hours ago, Ross McKittrick from Guelph University, and I'll just read to you what he says. He's an environmental economist. He said, if Alberta implemented the equivalent policy for the oil sands that McGuinty implemented for green energy, the province would guarantee to pay oil producers $1,000 $1,000 a barrel from now until 2031. And then when the deficit goes parabolic, they'd be whining that the rest of the country ought to subsidize them. And we tell them to get stuffed, which is what I hope the people out west tell McGuinty. And that's from a leading environmental economist from the University of Guelph, Ross McKittrick.
I guess playing the devil's advocate, some people might say that there's a big cleanup cost, though, with the oil sands that the public may have to bear down the line. And if we add that in, potentially these two sources of energy might be a little bit more equal. But let me ask you, if consumers wanted to pay the difference, if consumers came forward and said, I want to pay more for my power, I want to pay 2 or 3 times more so that I can have power that's generated through solar or wind or whatever, how would you view that?
Well, that's the power of public choice. I mean, if people want to pay more, if it's not being mandated by the government, like the light bulb ban, for example, then that's fine. I mean, I think that it's a capitalist free market. If people want to pay more, if they believe, for example, that we can stop climate change by our energy choices, then fine, they can pay for it. But the idea that they use tax money for this is an enormous mistake.
Now, Jack Layton has also taken issue at oil sands subsidies, and thanks very much. You've clarified for us that it's actually tax deferrals that they're receiving. But why do you think that the oil sands have become such a big flag for the NDP, for Dalton McGuinty? Why are now politicians finding? Why is this debate going on that's sort of pitting one region of the country against another?
Yeah, it's unfortunately all based on the idea that the oil sands are contributing more to climate change than any other energy source that produces that amount of electricity or produces that amount of oil in this case. So, and unfortunately, the whole basis of a lot of these arguments is the climate change argument. If you in fact take away the concern about greenhouse gases from the oil sands, it's actually not a difficult sell to sell oil sands or oil to the United States from the oil sands. So that is the main thing that's driving the anti-oil sands movement, is the idea that we can stop climate change by choosing low carbon, as they call it, energy sources. And so
you're not in that camp of believing that.
No, we think that you should focus on air pollution, things like sulfur dioxide and things that produce acid rain and smog and asthma and things like that, and land pollution, water pollution. That's something, by the way, the oil sands have to work on. They have to work on reducing real pollution, things like oil, land, and water pollution. Air, land, and water pollution. But the idea that they have to reduce greenhouse gases, I think that will go out of phase, and I think that 5 years from now you're going to have a lot of useless wind turbines that the government's just going to turn off, because I think the scare will be over by then, and we'll focus on reducing real pollution, which we have to do from coal stations and other good conventional energy sources.
Which Dalton McGuinty says he's doing, to his credit. So thanks very much for joining us. We're out of time here. Tom Harris, who's Executive Director of the International Climate Science Coalition. Thanks so much for being with us, Tom.
Sure. Yeah, sure, Joan.
Take care.